And we are now on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis, and the members of the family say to the Satan, Tiv Shapir, sit properly. Don't make all these disgusting meisim that are repulsive. Amalei, the Satan says, Havali Kasa. You know what? Why don't you pour me a cup of wine? Yavalei Kaspa, they gave him a cup of wine. Ichmar. He started coughing. Kicha. And he put his mucus into the cup of wine. And when the Bnei Bayis saw that, Nacharube, which means Garuba, they started yelling at him. Shaka Umes. And the Satan made believe that he was dead. And Shamu Davika Amri, the word got out in the streets that Plimo Kotel Gavra. And Plimo's a murderer. He caused the death of a man. And now they're after Plimo. They want to bring him to justice. Arak, he starts running away. He was afraid the Malchus would kill him. And he hid in a Beis HaKisei outside of the city. Azal Basrei, the Satan went after him. Nafal Kamei, he lays down flat, dead in front of Plimo. And Plimo is very, very upset because here's another man that dies. When the Satan saw how Plimo was in such tsar, Golile Nafshi revealed himself. I am the Satan. Amalei, my timer, Amart Chachi. And the Satan now reveals why he's so upset with Plimo, and he did all these things against Plimo. Why did you give me a curse? Gira be'ene de Satan. So the naive sort of tmimistic response of Plimo is, V'ela hechi ema. What should I say? I want to pray that you shouldn't be machshil me in chet. Amalei, you should have said, Lema marachmona nigar beisata. You should have been mispalel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu yigar beisata. Not that you should curse the Satan. Ask Hashem to take care of the Satan. Rav Chia bar Ashi havi rogil kol idon davi nofel yapet. He was nofel ponov when he said tachn. Havi Omer, he would say, Arachman yatsi leini mi yetzara. Yom Achad, on one particular day, Shmatinu Debese, his wife overheard him, and he was crying out and petitioning, begging the Yetzer Hara not to get the best of him. Amra Michti Ha Kamashni Deparshli Minai. It's been years since he had any sort of intimacy with me, and I assume that he's an old man, and the Yetzer Hara doesn't affect him. So my time of Kamarachi. So why is he davening to Hashem? Please save me from the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, she understood that he does suffer from the Yetzer Hara, despite his old age. Yom Achad Havi Kagoris begins say, one day she figures I'm going to fix him, and Reb Chia was learning out in the garden. Kishta Nafshe, she disguised herself with beautiful jewels and cosmetics. Cholfa v'tanya kameh, and she goes back and forth in front of him. And Reb Chia notices this beautiful woman who's going in front of him. Amra Allah, he says to her, Manat, who are you? Amra, she says to him, Anoch Harus, I'm the famous harlot of the town. And this was a very busy day for me. The Hadri Miyoma, I got back from a very busy day. There were many men who had relationship with me. And despite that, even though, again, this is a disgusting prostitute, nevertheless, Tva'a, Rabbi Chia had relations with her. The Yetzer Hara got the best of him. Amrullah, so his wife says to him, I see Ni'ala lahach ruma deresh tzutzisa. Please bring me a fruit from the tree up there on the deck, a beautiful fruit. Shavya, Rabbi Chia jumps up, Azal I say Ni'ala, to bring her this beautiful fruit from the top of this tree. And all this is because the Yetzer Hara got the best of him. Kiyasal, basically, when he comes home, Rabbi Chia bar Ashi realizes what he's guilty of. He had a relationship with a prostitute. Havik shagra de besa tanura. And his wife was heating up the oven. Solik, he goes in, v'koyasa v'gaveh. He sits down in the burning oven. He's basically trying to commit suicide. Amro Lay, his wife says to him, why are you doing this? Why are you entering into a hot oven? Amalei, Reb Chia responds to his wife, Hachi v'achi avi maisa, there's this beautiful woman, a Zona, and I had a relationship with her. Amalei, Anohavi, that was me. It wasn't Charusa, it was your own wife. Lo ishkachba. He didn't believe her. Adi Yavala Simani, she gave him Simanim to prove that it was her. Still, he wasn't Nochadaita, he wasn't happy. Amar La, Anna Mili Suri Chavne. I had kavanah to do this Isur, even though I didn't do the Isur. I need kapara because I had a desire to violate an Isur. And Kol Yomav Shalos Tzadik Misana. And Rabbi Chia, because he did this Maisa with his own wife, but he thought he was having a relationship with a harlot, therefore Misana would fast his whole life to have kapara ad to Meis Biosa Misa until he finally died from all those fasts.
Why did he do that?
The reason why she did it is because she overheard him praying to Hashem to protect him, that Hashem should protect him for the Yetzer Hara. And she was very upset because, all these years, he was poresh from her as if to say, I'm a zaken, I don't have a Yetzer Hara. And she wanted to show him that he really has a Yetzer Hara, and maybe he should rethink his life of precious and have a normal married life. Now, why is he guilty of any avera that he had to do tinios his whole life, when in fact he only had a relationship with his own wife? This Sanya, right? His wife had presented herself to him as some sort of prostitute. Probably gave herself a name, Anyway, so the pasuk says that if a woman takes a neder, Isha Feiram Hashem his Yislach Lo. The pasuk in Mata says that Hashem will forgive her. What do you mean forgive her? The Baal was made for a neder. A neder is not chal. She accepted upon herself Nazirus. V'shama baila v'heferla. Her husband heard about her neder, and he was made for it. But he lo yada sheferla baila. She had no knowledge of the fact that her husband was made for the neder. And she desecrated her Nazirus. She wasn't really a Nazira at all. But in her mind, she was a Nazira. And therefore, Hashem Yislach Lo means she needs kapara, because even if a person thinks they're eating non-kosher food, and it turns out to be kosher food, they still need a kapara, because their intention was to eat non-kosher food. And Rabbi Akiva, Kavimoti Lahai Psuko, Rabbi Akiva heard about this drasha. Havi Bachi, he would break out in tears. Omar, he would declare, Uma, Mishan is coming lechol b'sar chazir v'ol b'yod b'yad, b'asotle, a man who had kavanah to eat non-kosher food, but he ate kosher food, and he's allowed to eat that food. He didn't do any ma'aseh vera. Nevertheless, he needs kavanah, like he needs kapara, just like the Isha who didn't know that a Baal was made for the neder is. Omar, Torah tzrich kapara slicha. Imagine Mishan is coming lechol b'sar chazir v'ol b'yod b'sar chazir. He intended to eat non-kosher food, and in fact, he ate non-kosher food. He did a ma'aseh vera. Alachas kama v'kama. How much more so does he need kapara and slicha? Kayotze b'dover, in a similar way to Omer, Yudash in a similar pasuk with regard to Osham Tolui. So you have a piece of meat, you're not sure whether it's Shuman or Chelev. The Torah says that if he went ahead and he ate the meat, it was a suffix Shuman, suffix Chelev, and then it finds out that he had done a Maisa suffix Avera, he has to bring a carbon Osham Tolui. So Rabbi Kiva Magil Apostle he cried, Ma Mishan is coming lechol Shuman. His kavanah was to eat Shuman. But nevertheless, as it turned out, he didn't differentiate all of the other chelev. He ate chelev, which is also b'achila omer Torah v'lo yadav yoshem v'nosavono, that he will bear the iniquity of his sin. His mission is coming lechol chelev. For all of the other chelev, alachas kama kama. Imagine what kind of kapara you need if your intention was to eat chelev and you ate chelev. Isi ben Yehuda omer v'lo yadav yoshem v'nosavono. This teaches us that even a chet without yediyah is a chet, and he needs kapara. Al dover ze yidvu kol adovim. Anyone who realizes what the severity of a sin is, and he understands he should be mitztayer on this thing that if he has an avera, even if he didn't do it b'kavana, nevertheless he's punished. The Mishnah says, a man is allowed to be alone with his mother or with his daughter. And we're not choshish for an avera, Rav Yehuda Rav Asi, misyached adam machoso. A man is allowed to be on a temporary basis alone with his sister, not be ofen kavua. They shouldn't take a dormitory room together for long term. Vidarim imovim bito, but he's allowed to live on a permanent basis alone with his mother or with his daughter. And this is all based on the Gemara Bava Kama that establishes that the Anshe Knesset Gedola were mavatal the Yitzhahar farayos of the relatives of a mother and a daughter, and so too a daughter with her father. Ki Amra Kami de Shmuel. Shmuel never accepted this. Amar Shmuel declared, "Asul is yachinim kol arayos shebetorah." You're not allowed to be together alone with any of your relatives, not your sister, not your mother, not your daughter. Vafilu behema. You're not allowed to be alone with an animal. Tanan, we have a Mishnah, and it says, "Misyachid odom imo b'bito." The Mishnah says explicitly, you're allowed to be alone with your mother or with your daughter. And not only that, even moreover, Yashan ima v'kiru basar, a son is allowed to sleep naked in a bed with his mother, and a bas is allowed, as long as she's a katana, we'll see the age in a minute, she's allowed to sleep naked in a bed with her father, v'kiru basar, even when there's an agias basar, and we're not afraid of an avera. Two to the Shmuel is again Shmuel who said that there's an Isa Yichud even with a father with a daughter. Shmuel's going to try to prove that on this issue there's a machlokas tanoim, and I hold like this Tana. The Mishnah reflects the sheet of another Tana. Ulitamech hadesanya. What are you going to do with the price that says hachoso v'chamoso ushar kol harayis shebetorah ein adam misyachid imoeh? A man is not allowed to be alone with his sister, with his mother-in-law, Ella, the Aiden, unless there are two witnesses that are there and they chaperone them. The Aiden in, Shalom Aiden lo. Apparently only had to Yichud is here because he was in the presence of Aiden. I'm not exactly sure why the Gemara says Aiden here in the plural. L'chora, because one man with two women. Just 1 second. Yeah, one man with two women is also. So you need two men. That's why you need Eidim. Ela Tanoihi, we have no choice but to say there's a machlokas Tanoim if a man is allowed to be alone with these close relatives like his daughter. Tesanya Rabbi Meir used to tell his household, he zaru bibipnei biti. Unbelievable. We had the story before, Rabbi Meir with the Satan and that beautiful woman. And now Rabbi Meir is talking about his relation with his own daughter. And he says, be careful. I might, chas v'shalom, have a relationship with my own daughter, and therefore I'm not allowed to be alone with my daughter. And the same statement was made by Rabbi Tarfon. He zaru b'pnei kalosi. I cannot be alone. I should not be alone with my daughter-in-law. Liglal all of Osa Talmud. And one of the Talmud of Rabbi Tarfon made fun of him. What kind of chumrah is this? You can't be alone with your mother-in-law? Rabbi Avo, Mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Hoyu Yomi mu'atim achid nichshal oso Talmud b'chamoso. It wasn't a long time before that Talmud had a relationship with his own mother-in-law. Gradually. Now, before the Gemara brought Shmuel, who says a man is not allowed to have yichud even with an animal. Abai mechaltele mikula dabra. Abai was machmir like Shmuel, and when he came out to the fields, he used to chase away the animals from the field so that he shouldn't be alone with the animal. Rabbi Sheshis ma'abrele mitzvah. Rabbi Sheshis had a minhag to take the animals over to the other side of the field that they shouldn't come to yichud. And the Gemara tells the following story. Rav Kanan minardoi iklol Rav Kahana lefumnaro. He chanced upon, Rav Kanan chanced upon Rav Kahana on the brink of the Nohar, Bisfas HaNohar, Chazia, and he saw Rav Kahana, the Yosef v'Kogaras v'Kaima v'Emel Kameh. He didn't pay any attention to this animal, and he was learning what the animal was there. He was alone with the animal. Omalei, Rav Kanan says to Lo Savalei Mar, don't you hold from Rav Kahana? Don't you, Rav Kahana, hold from the Isa Yichud Afilim Behema? Omalei Lavadatai. I didn't pay any attention that the animal was there. Now, here's a very important point. The poskim write that the din of Yichud and Behema is only a chumrah. Yisrael lo nechshedu al mishka Behema. And this is going to be a Gemara that we'll do tomorrow, Mitzvah when we make a siyum on Seder Nosh. And this is quoted by the Tosfos, by the Rosh, by the Rambam. HaMisrachek miyichud and behema, or with Zachar, that he shouldn't be alone with a man, harei zeh meshubach. But it's all a chumrah, and it's not meikra din. We have different women that are considered sonos zu as zu. Like, for example, two yavamos means two women who were married to the same man who died, and he died without children. They are called yavamos. They fall for yibum to his living, surviving brother. Or in state saros, or two women that are married to the same man, or isha v'chamosa. He's allowed to have a yichud situation with a woman and her mother-in-law, im isha bas baila, or with a woman and the daughter of her husband. In other words, nolda lo misha cheres. In all these cases, what's common is that they sonos su, and therefore they chaperone. We're not afraid that one will cover up for the other one if there's a ma'isa vera, because they hate each other. And so too, if a girl is very young, she's old enough to know what is tam bia, but she doesn't have a yetzer for bia. And the poskim have a debate exactly how old she is. Some say she's 3 years old. Some say she's 5, 7. You have all the different shittas. And since she's Eina Moseres Atzma L'Bia, she doesn't have a Yetzirah for Bia. Therefore, we're not afraid of a Ma'asav Vera. And therefore, she becomes a chaperone. No, since she would never give herself over to seduction, now she becomes a blabbermouth, and she inhibits the man from having any relationship with the other woman that's with him. So you can have a young girl as a chaperone, and that removes the Isur Yichud. However, Higdilu, we said before that a father is allowed to sleep in the same bed with his daughter, a son allowed to sleep in the same bed with his mother. That's only when they're ketana. But Higdilu, ze yoshen b'ksuso, v'zu yoshen b'ksuso. They have to sleep with their clothes on. V'kama. At what point do you say Higdilu? And here we have machlokas. Omar Rav Adabar Azomar Rav Ashi Tinokes. If she's bas teisha shana v'yom echad, she's 9 years and a day, then she can no longer sleep with her father in kiruv basa. But up until the age of 9 years and a day, she's allowed to be in the same bed with her father naked. V'tinok, and what about a boy? Ben shteimesrei shana v'yom echad. He's allowed to be with his mother b'kiruv basar until he's 12. But the other opinion says no. Tinokos b'shteimesrei shana v'yom echad. She's allowed to be alone with her father in a bed until she's 12 years old, meaning a real gadol. V'tinok ben shloshes yom echad, until he's a real gadol. V'zeh v'zeh. But whether it's according to the first shita or the second shita, there's another limitation to this halacha, this permission allowing sleeping with in the same bed with your daughter. This is a pasuk in Yechezkel, shadayim nechonu sarech tzimeh. In other words, if a woman, a young girl, is mature enough that she has simonim, and these are simonim of gadlus with pubic hairs and breasts, as soon as she reaches that age, then she's already considered a gedola, and she's not allowed to sleep together with her father in the same bed. Why is that? Because once she brings simonim, if she's 9, let's say she's 9 years and a day, she's considered gedola, and she already has like a yetzahara, and she's embarrassed to be with her father naked. According to the second lishon, if she has these simonim and she's less than 12 years old in a day, then this is not called simonim, it's called shuma. Amar Afram bar Papa, Amar Avchizda. Lo shana, when we said that a woman is allowed to be alone with her father in bed, Ella she'ena bosha lamod lefanav aron. She's not embarrassed to be naked in his presence. Aval, if she, the daughter, is bosha lamod lefanav aron, also the father is not allowed to sleep with her bekiruv basar. This is the girsa that we have. The Rif has an opposite girsa. He says, Lo shanel shebo shalam lefana. In other words, the Iser of sleeping with your bas gedola only applies when she's embarrassed to stand in front of him naked. If she's not embarrassed, and even if she's a gedola, muta lishon ima. My timer, yetzer albasha. Once there's an embarrassment, that proves that the yetzer hara is she's already sexually aware. The Gemara tells the following story of Achavar Abba Ikla lebei Rav Chizda Chasne. He came to the house of Rav Chizda, his son-in-law. Shakli lebas brate. Rav Achabar Yaakov takes his granddaughter, Osve bekanfe, and he brings her into his chek. He embraces her in his bosom. And they slept together with Kiruv Bos. This is a grandfather and a granddaughter. Amalei, Rav Chizda said, Lo Savale Mar Dimakadsha. Doesn't Rav Chizda says to Rav Achi, says, don't you know that she's already married? In other words, I married her off. And therefore she's an Eish Ish. How can you sleep naked with an Eish Ish, even if you're a grandfather? Amalei, Rav Achi said to Rav Chizda, how are you Makadish her and she's such a young girl? Avarta le loch adarav. The Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, the Item Rav Elazar. Also, the other lekadish is bitok shiktana ad shetagdil. V'tomer leploni ani rotza. It's a sign for disaster when you marry off a ketana and she's not old enough to know that this is her choice for a suitor. So Rav Chizda responds, Mar nami avalei ad Shmuel. And you also violated a din of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel ein mishtamshim beisha. You're not allowed to use a woman. Men should not use women. And how did you use my daughter, who's a ketana, and you brought her into the chek? No, that wasn't shimush. Here we turn to daf pei beis hakol l'shem shamayim. The isa of being mishtamish ben isha is only if there's a need of something of chiba, a chiba of ishus. You don't ask a woman to pour your wine for you, and so forth and so on. But when I put my granddaughter in my chek, that was l'shem shamayim. I wanted to display and demonstrate my chiba, and that would be a great nachas ruach for the child's mother. That I'm a chaviv espita, well, because she's my granddaughter, and it's not a chiba of ishus, and therefore would not come under the Isur Shmuel. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Pei Beis, which we'll pick up in Mirza Hashem tomorrow, exact time to be announced. Okay, Kol Tuv. Have a great day. Thank you.